Lucy Stevens was born into a world of privilege and high expectations, the only daughter of a real estate magnate. Her childhood was a meticulously planned parade of equestrian lessons, exclusive private schools, and glamorous debutante balls. From a young age, she learned the importance of maintaining an impeccable public image, a lesson that would shape her entire life. However, behind that charmed facade, the reality was very different. In the Stevens household, the relationship with her parents was far from ideal. Her father, Theodore, was an extremely demanding man, and her mother, Evelyn, kept Lucy under constant scrutiny, leaving little room for a true emotional connection. Lucy found solace in her studies. She excelled academically, developing a special passion for art history. Her dedication and brilliance secured her a place at an Ivy League university, where she flourished intellectually but struggled to fit in socially. The pressure to maintain the family's impeccable reputation, while struggling to forge her own identity, led to a series of tumultuous relationships and a growing sense of disconnection from her true self. Beneath her polished exterior, Lucy struggled with deep insecurities and a constant need for validation. Her romantic relationships were often intense but short-lived. Though she claimed to seek stability, she was actually drawn to men who offered her the excitement and attention she craved, rather than the calm and stability she claimed to desire. It was during this stage of her life that she met Finn Calloway. Finn, with his quiet confidence and genuine nature, seemed to be the answer to all of Lucy's inner chaos. She saw in him the potential for the life she had always been told she should want. As their relationship progressed, Lucy became convinced that Finn was the key to finally becoming the person she was meant to be. However, old habits die hard. As her wedding day approached, doubts and unease began to creep in. The facade she had so carefully constructed was beginning to crack, revealing the complex and conflicted woman behind it. Finn Calloway, on the other hand, came from a completely different world. The son of a small-town doctor and an English teacher, he grew up in a close-knit community where values such as hard work, honesty, and loyalty were more important than material success. From a young age, Finn showed a natural aptitude for science and an insatiable curiosity about the world around him. His parents encouraged him to explore and question everything, which ignited his passion for environmental conservation. He spent his summers on camping trips and visits to science museums, which strengthened his commitment to protecting nature. Although he was brilliant at school, he never stopped being a humble person and loved by his peers. Finn was the kind of person who helped his peers with tutoring or volunteered at an animal shelter without seeking any recognition. His dedication to science led him to earn a scholarship to a prestigious university, where he graduated with a degree in environmental science. It was during this time that he met his cousin Asher Calloway. Although they came from very different worlds, Asher was from the wealthier side of the family. The two formed a close bond. Finn was often a stabilizing influence on his cousin, who tended to be more impulsive. After graduation, Finn's passion for conservation led him to join a nonprofit dedicated to protecting endangered species. This work took him to remote corners of the world, where he witnessed both the beauty of nature and the devastating impact human activity has on the planet's most fragile ecosystems. These experiences only strengthened Finn's resolve to make a difference. At a fundraising event for his organization, he met Lucy Stevens. He was immediately struck by her beauty and her intelligence, but it was her hidden vulnerability that truly captured his heart. In Lucy, Finn saw someone who needed the kind of love and stability he could offer. As their relationship deepened, Finn believed he had found his ideal match, someone who shared his values and challenged him intellectually. Together, he saw a future filled with shared adventures and a common purpose. The proposal came naturally, and Finn eagerly threw himself into planning a life with the woman he loved. What Finn didn't know, however, was that the foundation of trust he held so dear was about to be shaken to its core, calling into question his beliefs and the very essence of who he was. Enter Asher Calloway, the black sheep of the family. Far from being uncomfortable with this role, he seemed to relish it. Born into the wealthy branch of the Calloway clan, Asher grew up with all the advantages money could buy, but without the emotional stability he needed. His father, a powerful corporate lawyer, was rarely around, while his mother sought solace in social events and prescription drugs. Left to his own devices, Asher developed a rebellious streak early on. He used his charm and good looks to manipulate those around him, defying the rules with increasingly risky behavior. Despite his troubled home life, Asher possessed a keen intelligence and a natural charisma that drew people to him. He excelled in school when he wanted to, but more often than not he could be found leading his peers in mischief. It was during one of these adventures that he first bonded with his cousin Finn, who had come to visit over the summer break. Finn's constant presence and genuine concern for Asher's well-being made a deep impression on him. It was perhaps the first time Asher felt truly seen and valued for who he was, not just his last name or his ability to get into trouble. That connection with Finn became a lifeline, one of the few stable relationships in Asher's turbulent life. As they grew older, their paths diverged. While Finn pursued his passion for environmental science, Asher drifted aimlessly between college majors, never finding a clear purpose. Eventually, he landed a job at a tech startup, more drawn to the lifestyle it offered than a real interest in the work. Asher's personal life was equally chaotic. A series of failed relationships left him cynical about love, but he continued to seek validation through fleeting conquests. He gained a reputation as a charming rogue, leaving a trail of broken hearts behind him. However, when Finn introduced him to Lucy, something changed in Asher's world. Lucy seemed to match him in wit and complexity. She understood the pressures of belonging to a prominent family, which created an immediate connection between the two. What began as harmless flirtation soon turned into a dangerous attraction, one that Asher knew he must resist, but against which he felt increasingly powerless. As the wedding day approached, the triangle between Lucy, Finn, and Asher grew increasingly tense. Lucy, already reeling from her own doubts about marriage, began to find herself drawn to the dark charisma of Asher, who, despite being Finn's opposite in many ways, understood her in a way Finn could not. Finn, for his part, remained oblivious to the growing storm brewing over their relationship. Torn between his loyalty to Finn and his growing feelings for Lucy, Asher began to display increasingly erratic behavior. The internal conflict that consumed him brought out the worst in him, and that sense of desperation would eventually contribute to the tragic events that would unfold after Finn Calloway and Lucy Stevens' engagement. The engagement was the social event of the season. Finn had proposed on a moonlit beach during a conservation trip to Costa Rica, giving Lucy an ethically sourced diamond ring that symbolized both his love and his values. Lucy, swept up in the romance of the moment and the promise of a stable future, said yes without hesitation. News of their engagement spread quickly through social circles. The Stevenses were thrilled that their daughter had finally found a suitable match, though they found Finn's dedication to his nonprofit work somewhat quaint. The Calloways, for their part, welcomed Lucy with open arms, fascinated by her sophistication and devotion to Finn. As the couple began planning the wedding, however, the first cracks in their relationship began to emerge. Lucy, influenced by her mother and years of societal expectations, pushed for a lavish wedding that would be the talk of the town. Finn, true to his modest roots and environmental consciousness, advocated for a smaller, more intimate celebration. Often, Finn felt as if he was unilaterally giving in, agreeing to a more extensive guest list and more extravagant venue than he was comfortable with. He justified these concessions as acts of love, wanting Lucy to have the day of her dreams. For her part, Lucy began to feel a growing resentment. She interpreted Finn's reluctance to accept her wishes as a lack of enthusiasm for their future union. The stress of wedding planning soon took its toll on both of them, and the relationship slowly began to fall apart. Lucy became increasingly irritable, arguing with Finn over insignificant details, such as the shades of the tablecloths or the wine selection. Finn, in an attempt to avoid conflict, would retreat into his work, spending long hours at the office and leaving much of the decision-making to Lucy. It was during this chaotic period that Asher began to play a larger role in their lives. Always ready to tell a joke to lighten the mood or offer a shoulder to cry on, he became a confidant to both Finn and Lucy. Finn, grateful for his cousin's support, didn't notice the lingering glances between Asher and Lucy, or the way their hands brushed for a second longer than necessary. Lucy, for her part, began to look forward to Asher's visits. She relished the excitement and unpredictability he brought to her increasingly regimented life. She told herself that her growing attraction to Asher was just a result of pre-wedding stress, a natural response to the pressure of planning such a major event. As the wedding day approached, however, the tension between Finn and Lucy reached a breaking point. A heated argument over seating arrangements left Lucy in tears and Finn storming out of their apartment. It was Asher who came to comfort Lucy that night. He brought with him a bottle of expensive champagne and a willing ear to listen. As Lucy poured out her fears and doubts, something changed between them. The line between comfort and desire blurred, and in a moment of weakness, they shared a kiss that would set off a series of events that would lead to tragedy. The next morning, racked with guilt but unable to deny the passion she felt, Lucy made a decision that would change the course of all their lives. She convinced herself that what Finn didn't know couldn't hurt her. She thought she might have one last breath of excitement before settling into married life. Little did she know that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Thus began the affair between Lucy Stevens and Asher Calloway. What began as a spark soon grew into an uncontrollable fire. Forbidden attraction quickly consumed all reason and caution. What began with furtive glances and lingering touches quickly evolved into clandestine, passionate encounters. Their first physical encounter occurred under the pretext of planning a surprise gift for Finn. Lucy had asked for Asher's help in choosing a gift, although she knew full well that his intentions were far from innocent. They met at the bar of a luxury hotel, the kind of place where discretion was guaranteed and questions weren't asked. As they leafed through a watch catalog, the tension between them was palpable. A simple brush of hands was all it took for the pretense to disappear. Without a word, they made their way to a room Asher had booked. Later, as Lucy lay in bed next to him, she told herself it had been a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness that would never be repeated. But the thrill of the forbidden was too intoxicating to resist. Thus, Asher and Lucy developed an elaborate system of coded messages. A message about flower arrangements meant a meeting at the hotel. A call about suit fittings, a signal for a rendezvous at Asher's apartment. They became masters at stealing moments together, from quick encounters in Lucy's office to passionate escapades in Asher's car. Finn ended the conversation, feeling emotionally drained and defeated. The perfect timing between Lucy and Asher in denying his accusations only deepened the fears that had been stalking him for weeks. Despite the calm and convincing explanations, something inside him kept screaming at him that all was not well. He stared at Lucy, who was now looking at him with a mix of discomfort and resentment as she put her phone away after the call with Asher. Despite Lucy's assurances that everything was fine and that Finn was just being paranoid, the cold silence that settled between them was more eloquent than any word spoken during that conversation. Finn knew something was broken, but he couldn't quite pinpoint it. While Lucy went back to wedding preparations, her mind was elsewhere and Finn felt it. In the days that followed, the tension between them was palpable. Though they tried to keep up appearances in front of friends and family, the emotional space between them grew. Small talk became empty, and smiles felt forced. Finn, caught in an endless cycle of suspicion and denial, began to question whether he should call off the wedding or go ahead, clinging to the hope that maybe it was all just his pre-wedding nerves. Meanwhile, Lucy continued to see Asher. The fear of discovery and the risk of losing everything they had built fueled their attraction. Each clandestine encounter, whether a quick kiss in the elevator or a stolen moment in Asher's car, became more intense, more desperate. They knew they were playing with fire, but adrenaline and desire seemed to override any rationality. Lucy, torn between two worlds, clung to her affair with Asher as an escape from the predictable life she had with Finn. Asher, for his part, was caught in an emotional whirlwind. What began as a simple fling had evolved into something much deeper. He found himself fantasizing about being with Lucy openly, imagining a future where they could be together without the weight of betrayal hanging over them. However, he knew that such a future would mean the ruin of his relationship with Finn, a sacrifice he wasn't ready to make yet, but knew would eventually be inevitable. With the wedding day fast approaching, both Lucy and Asher lived in a constant contradiction. On one hand, the weight of guilt and fear of being discovered constantly haunted them. But on the other hand, the intensity of their feelings became increasingly difficult to ignore. Finally, the eve of the wedding arrived. Finn and Lucy's family and friends had arrived in town, and the pressure of the final preparations was in the air. Finn, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The night before the big day, he decided to do something he never imagined he would do. He went to confront Asher directly. He showed up unannounced at his cousin's apartment. When Asher opened the door and saw Finn, his face briefly tensed before composing himself. Finn entered without a word, his gaze fixed on Asher, searching for signs of the truth he was so afraid of discovering. "We need to talk," Finn said, his voice low and heavy with emotion. Asher tried to keep his composure, but there was a palpable nervousness in the air. Finn began to ask questions, first indirectly, as if trying to probe for the truth without actually confronting him directly. But when Asher began to evade the answers, Finn confronted him head-on. "Asher, I want you to tell me the truth. Is there something going on between you and Lucy?" The silence that followed was deafening. Asher, who had always been quick to respond, was left speechless, which only increased the sense of betrayal building in Finn's heart. The seconds felt like an eternity before Asher finally broke the silence. "It's not what you think," he began, but his voice lacked conviction. Finn, who had been holding back his emotions for weeks, exploded. "Then tell me what it is. What's been going on between you two? Tell me, Asher." Asher lowered his head, unable to hold his cousin's gaze. Finn felt the world crumble around him. The betrayal he had so feared was finally confirmed, and words could not contain the pain he felt. Heartbroken and mind reeling, Finn walked out of Asher's apartment, leaving his cousin mired in guilt. He knew he couldn't go through with the wedding. The next day, as the world prepared to celebrate what was meant to be the happiest day of his life, Finn would be faced with the hardest decision he had ever made. In an aura of formality and eternal promises, but Finn was barely listening. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and thoughts. Every word the officiant spoke seemed to resonate with an empty echo. As the ceremony progressed, Finn looked at Lucy, seeing not only the woman he had planned to spend his life with, but also the person who had broken his heart. Lucy, for her part, felt every second like an eternity. As the officiant spoke about love, loyalty, and trust, each word felt like a dagger to her conscience. Though she tried to maintain her composure, fear and guilt washed over her. Her breathing became faster, and inside she struggled with the growing certainty that she was about to lose everything. Asher, standing beside Finn as best man, felt trapped in a web of lies that he himself had helped to weave. His mind drifted from one fantasy to another, imagining what could have been if things had been different, but also acknowledging that the damage had already been done. He glanced at Lucy out of the corner of his eye, but she did not return his gaze. The weight of her betrayal crushed him, and for the first time, Asher fully understood the consequences of what they had done. When the officiant reached the most crucial part of the ceremony, the question everyone had been waiting for: Finn Calloway, do you take Lucy Stevens to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and cherish all the days of your life? Time seemed to stand still. Finn took a deep breath, the tension in the air palpable. He looked at Lucy, then at Asher. The internal struggle was reflected in his eyes, his heart broken and his mind clouded by betrayal. All the memories they had shared, the happy times, the future dreams, all seemed like a distant illusion now. Finally, with a calm that betrayed the storm inside him, Finn spoke, but not with the words everyone had expected. "I can't." A murmur of shock ran through the crowd. Lucy froze, her eyes wide as she looked at Finn, horror and realization flooding her face. Asher felt as if all the air had been forced out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry. I can't do this," Finn continued, his voice shaking slightly. "I can't marry you, Lucy, not after what's happened." The great hall filled with shocked whispers as the guests tried to process what was happening. Lucy, pale as a ghost, dropped the bouquet she had been clutching tightly. Her hand shook uncontrollably as she tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Finn took a step back, his gaze shifting from Lucy to Asher, whose face was now completely pale. "I knew something was wrong, but I never wanted to believe it," Finn said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I saw it in their looks, in their lies, in the secrets. But I can't fool myself anymore." Lucy tried to get closer to him, her lips trembling as she said his name in a choked whisper. "Finn, I'm sorry, Lucy," he said, tears forming in his eyes. "But I can't marry you knowing what you've done to him." The confession, though not explicit, was enough to send the room into chaos. Murmurs turned to gasps, and some guests began to rise from their seats, in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Lucy's mother, visibly shaken, tried to approach her daughter, but Lucy was frozen. Asher, unable to bear it any longer, stepped forward. "Finn, please, I'm sorry. It wasn't how it was supposed to be," she stammered. But her words sounded empty and desperate. Finn didn't need to hear any more. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the altar, Lucy, Asher, and the remnants of what was once their life together. As he walked, the weight of betrayal and liberation fell upon him like an avalanche. Lucy, realizing she had lost everything in that instant, broke down, tears falling freely as the guests watched her with a mix of shock and compassion. The wedding was over, but the echo of her failure would forever resonate in the hearts of all present. Finn, stepping out into the fresh, liberating air, took a deep breath. Despite the pain, he had made the hardest decision of his life, and though the future seemed uncertain, he was no longer trapped in the shadows of lies. The sound of the gun in Asher's hand cut through the air like a sharp knife. Finn's gaze met Asher's, his eyes reflecting a mix of shock and belated understanding. Time seemed to have stopped as everyone present faced the chilling reality of the moment. Lucy, her face still contorted with fear, tried to get closer to Asher, her voice shaking as she pleaded. "Asher, what are you doing? No!" "Put the gun down." Asher's hand was shaking. His face was filled with palpable desperation, and the fear in his eyes was evident. "No, I didn't want it to end like this," he muttered, his voice shaking and broken. Finn, though paralyzed by disbelief, tried to think clearly. He knew that confronting Asher could be dangerous, and in an attempt to de-escalate the situation, he raised his hand slowly, without any sudden movements. "Asher, you don't have to do this," he said, his voice trying to convey calm. "None of this is worth it. We don't want anyone to get hurt." Some guests had found shelter behind the columns and chairs, while others were paralyzed by fear. Confusion reigned in the hall, and chaos was taking over. Panicked murmurs mixed with the sound of the ragged breathing of those present. A group of guests began to grab their phones, trying to call the police, while others tried to convince Asher to surrender. The wedding official, pale-faced, cautiously approached, trying to speak to Asher from a safe distance. "Please put the gun down. We can resolve this without anyone getting hurt." Lucy, seeing the desperation on Asher's face, tried to approach carefully. "Asher, please, this is not what you wanted. You're ruining everything even more. Just let us talk." Asher seemed to struggle with his own decision. The gun in his hand seemed to be a weight he could barely bear. "I didn't know what to do. I thought I could fix it, that I could," he said, his voice breaking. Finn, his heart in his throat, tried to remain calm. "Asher, I know you're going through a tough time, but this isn't the solution. No one has to get hurt here. Please let us help." Finally, police sirens could be heard in the distance, rapidly approaching. The sound of the siren brought a new wave of panic, but also a sliver of hope that the situation could be brought under control. Lucy, watching Asher's desperation, tried one last effort. With slow steps, she reached out a hand to him. "Asher, I know you. I know this isn't you. Put the gun down, and we can talk about this. There is help available. Please trust me." Asher looked at Lucy, his eyes reflecting the inner torment he was going through. The gun in his hand shook, and finally, with a sigh of exhaustion, he slowly lowered it. Tears began to fill his eyes as he dropped the gun to the ground. The police, who had arrived at the hall, moved with professional precision to secure the area and take Asher into custody. Finn, breathing heavily, approached Lucy, who had collapsed on the floor, anguish visible on her face. As the officers led Asher away, the chaos in the hall began to calm down, but the damage had already been done. The wedding, which had begun as a celebration of love, had turned into a scene of betrayal, despair, and chaos. Sadness and confusion filled the air as the shocked guests tried to process what they had just witnessed. The sight of Finn and Lucy, once filled with promise and dreams, was now marked by brokenness and betrayal. As the final details were put together and the hall slowly emptied, Finn found himself standing alone in the middle of the venue, the weight of that day's events sinking him into a deep sadness. Beside him, Lucy tried to pull herself together, the future she had imagined crumbling before her eyes. The wedding, which had begun as a celebration of love, had ended in an unexpected tragedy. In the months following the tragedy at Rosewood Hills, the lives of all involved underwent drastic and profound changes. The wedding that had begun with promises of love and happiness ended in a tragedy that left indelible scars. Asher Calloway, facing the gravity of his actions, was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence, though just in the eyes of the law, could not repair the emotional damage or bring back the life lost. The devastation of his action followed him each day as he faced time in prison. Finn Calloway, deeply affected by the loss of Lucy and the collapse of their future together, found it difficult to move on with his life in the city. Guilt and grief overwhelmed him, and he sought refuge in nature, away from the bustle and pain that surrounded him. He moved to a secluded cabin in the mountains, where he dedicated himself to restoring and preserving natural areas that once gave him peace. Although the landscape provided temporary comfort, the void left by Lucy's loss was never fully filled. Through the solitude of his days in the wilderness, Finn began to find a way to heal. He wrote about his experiences, using his grief to create a series of reflections and memoirs that, though sad, capture the complexity of his emotional journey. These words eventually transformed into a book that touched the hearts of many who had also faced loss and betrayal. Meanwhile, the Calloway family and Lucy's close friends tried to rebuild their lives. Memories of that tragic day lingered like a shadow over them, but they tried to find a way to move forward. Lucy's deeply affected parents dedicated their time to charitable causes related to mental health and violence prevention in honor of their daughter. In an unexpected turn, Finn's book captured the attention of a wider audience, sparking discussions about overcoming trauma and the power of personal redemption. Her story inspired many to face their own challenges with courage, despite the darkness that can sometimes envelop people. Years later, Finn was still living in his cabin, in occasional contact with close friends and family. Although the sadness of Lucy's loss never completely disappeared, he had learned to accept his grief and find moments of peace in the serenity of nature. His life, though marked by suffering, was also filled with small joys and new hopes. In remembering Lucy and the impact of her life and death, Finn found renewed purpose. The tragedy at Rosewood Hills, while devastating, left a lasting lesson about love, forgiveness, and human resilience. The story of Finn, Lucy, and Asher became a powerful reminder of the fragility of life and the ability of the human spirit to find hope even in the darkest of times. And so our story concludes. From the sparkle of a dream wedding to the tragic twist that changed everything forever, we've been on a journey filled with emotion, betrayal, and redemption. Thank you for joining us on this complex and moving tale. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections in the comments. Remember, while life can be hard and challenging, there's always room for hope and change. Until next time,